All right, so welcome to the CodeX Cantina. I am Una,
Crypto.
and we are going to go a step deeper into the books that we read, and we will still try to pull some things out of it that I think are going to be some good talking points. I have a few today, Crypto. Are you prepared for yours?
I am prepared, except for I don't have any quotes.
I actually don't have any quotes either. I actually thought this section was a little bit dry on the
Dialogue.
Yeah. Well, it had dialogue. It lacked writing that really dove into what I thought were human conditions or things worth really, things that are typically discussed. So I thought it was good.
Yeah, I mean, well, the quotes we usually delve deep into like philosophy and how they make us feel and stuff like that, and there was very to little and none of that. Maybe I can pull something out at the end. We'll see.
We'll see. All right, so let's just jump right into our initial thoughts since we're going to skip our quote section.
Disappointment. Major disappointment. I'm sorry. You guys can pull me over the coals down in the comment section below, but I was disappointed. And if we're going with brain candy, these were sour worms.
Ho!
Yeah.
So okay, you were at like just almost an 8 the first 8 chapters.
Barely an 8. Yeah.
The second 8, you're like, okay, solid 8, right? And we talked about like, hey, there was some fun moments, like really tense scenes with that. We got to the final here,
Yep.
and it tanked.
Tanked for me. Yeah.
What was it that it didn't fulfill for you?
All right, so here's my issue. Nothing happens, and nothing happens of substance. And I know that I've complained about this before, and I hate to be like the negative guy, but we know that nothing is going to happen, and that is because of the show Rebels. And that just bums me out because it feels like so much more could have been done because Thrawn is such an interesting character. And I guess that's what is my biggest complaint that I want to get across is that the end of the book has so little Thrawn. You know how like in some movies, and I can't remember what movie it is, but there's some like movie where like the main character is in it for like 13 minutes or something.
There's a lot of examples where they'll use like a big character or name and then they kill them off quickly, or like their story is really brought on by another cheaper actor or something like that, and the other character was just the marketing to get someone into the movie or into the book.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what this is almost. There's I think it's a Bruce Willis movie or something where he's only in it for a minimal amount. I mean, it's like a 90-minute movie, and the guy's in the movie for 20 minutes. That's this. The last third of the book, Thrawn is barely in it. It's all about Ronan and Savit and Eli and Aralani and Pharaoh and Vanya. It's all about them, and that's fine. But I didn't pay money to read about those characters. I mean, and literally the name of the book is Thrawn, Treason. And we're going into spoiler territory here, people, because it's the end of the book. Savit is the traitor, and you have a good. I think that you do better than the average person at figuring things out, and I didn't figure it out till late, and maybe that makes me a little bit slow or dumb. But I also felt like it came out of left field. Like he's a throwaway character. Like he was pretty much just introduced in this. He becomes the traitor, and then it's thrown away. And there are no real consequences to that. Like, I know it couldn't have been Krennic because Krennic's in the Rogue One in the movie, but make it something of substance. I just felt like it was a throwaway. I don't know.
Well, here, let me bring you up. So on page 231 of chapter 17, I have this highlighted. It says, "Good," Savit said. "Well, I admit I'm intrigued by all of this. I think it's time to see the man for myself." "Sir?" Lockery asked carefully. "I thought you'd agreed that I'd hold on to the prisoners for now." "I've reconsidered," Savit said. "Whoever they are, it sounds like they're genuinely afraid of Haviland. That suggests that the prudent course would be to get them as far out of her reach as possible. Rendezvous with me." He peered at his navigational chart. "Let's make it to the Sev Talk system." So this was, I wrote down, you know what my marginalization here, or marginalia is here? I wrote down Savit is the bad guy. So that was we did have earlier on in the book. We had a lot of references to music, right? And so initially you have to ask yourself, oh, okay, is this the bad guy? But then they plant that little red herring where they say he has that Thrawn can't do it by music alone. So you start to think like, oh, is this a red herring? Like it'll actually be someone else. But they did. They followed through with Savit being the bad guy. And here is the second quote where when I read this, so the first one I was pretty confident that Savit was the bad guy. This is when he's having his exchange later on in chapter 7, where the character that's talking to him says, "That doesn't sound very loyal. Loyalty is a slippery term these days," Savit said.
See, that's good. You're able to read into that because I was not.
But when I say it now, thinking critically is a skill. It's not some magical thing. Like those people that always quote unquote predict it. They're not predicting. They're not magical, clairvoyant people. They listen to the clues that authors or writers tell them about what's coming. And as I say this directly to you, when Savit, the good guy, that just says, "I've changed my mind. I'm going to keep these prisoners for myself," and says loyalty is a slippery term these days, like a really generic throwaway term like that. That should be red bells for most people to say, hey, something's going on with this character.
You Thrawned this book, by the way.
When I read really slow, so we talked about the speed that it took us to read these, and
right.
One of our friends, he said he finished it in 2 hours, which is crazy fast. The 8 chapters, that is, not the whole book. And it took me 4 hours. And that's because I'm pausing to, enter marginalia into my Kindle when I'm reading it. I will look up some things. I'll look up, was this character introduced in this? Because, Captain Paleon was a character that was new to me, but I guess he's from the old legends that a lot of people were excited about. So I will take time to do some research on some things or think about it rather than just plow through it. And for me, that's more enriching, but that doesn't mean that I'm able to predict the future or even just smarter. It's just I read slowly to pick up on these things because that's what I find most rewarding.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the point of this channel and everything, is looking at it through a different lens and trying to pick up on those things. And again, I think that you're probably doing this, you're able to do it more frequently and better than your average person. But I'm sure others out there caught on it, just as early as you did. I was not able to do that. And maybe if I had, I would have liked the book more. Maybe I would have hated it even more. I don't know.
Because what's enjoyable to me is that when an author does take the time to put clues as to what's going to happen, so that things do feel more natural to readers and that it is more rewarding. Just predicting it isn't the thrill to me. It's the search that's exciting. It's reading into it. It's finding literature moments in these books that make it more rewarding.
Yeah, and I guess that's my other complaint too, is so much of the entire, I don't know if it's a trilogy. Let's call it a trilogy right now because...
Which it is right now, right? It is
right, yeah, it is a trilogy right now. Allegedly, Zahn wants to write more stuff about Thrawn and continue on the story, if that's even possible, if Disney lets him, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I think so much of the trilogy is written so well. I know we're talking about the third book here, but I think it's important to still bring up the fact that book 1 is amazing. I think that I ended up giving a 9.5 or a 10 even. It's an awesome book. I love every aspect of the first book. The second book is a little bit disappointing. Thrawn alliances, and that's just because of some of the Padme and Anakin stuff. But all the Vader stuff, all the Thrawn stuff is fantastic. There's very little throwaway in that. I felt it moved the story forward, and we saw a lot of backstory of how Thrawn got to where he was. In this one, it takes course over a week.
Yeah, I think you're right, but for some reason in the Rebel show, I agree, they did say a week, but some reason in the Rebel show, I thought there was something about this being taken place, like he was only gone for 4 days. Maybe I'm misremembering that. Okay. Anyways, irrelevant.
Well, no, it is relevant because at the end, Thrawn always wins, right? And he lost. And I guess I kind of knew he had to lose because the Defender program doesn't get made and the Death Star does get made. So Krennic gets his funding, obviously. So Thrawn loses. Thrawn loses the bet. He doesn't get the Grolok problem solved, or at least he does indirectly, and Ronan screws him over.
He got him on the technicality, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
he solved this huge thing, but he didn't get rid of the Grolics. And Thrawn accepted that he did fail that term. And I think if this were like a straight trilogy and this were the end, how frustrating! Like I'm picturing more happening, and I have some talking points on where I think some of the bigger questions are. But if this were the ending, how frustrating of an ending would this be for a trilogy? Like this would be a horrible ending. Like,
horrible ending.
You knew how it's going to end, and that's fine. But the fact, as you point, is what happened along the way. What did we learn? What was really interesting? There were some questions raised about bureaucracy, which I think were the best parts of this book. But nothing really changed as a result of this book, right?
Yeah, nothing happens. I mean, so Eli comes back. We learn that, again, major spoilers here. We learn that Eli is...
let's just skip we're just not going to do a plot review. Like, I think people are going to get it through this talk. Like, basically, Thrawn went off. He beat the Grisks, right? He ousted Savit. Used Karen Pharaoh to counter his moves. Pharaoh and Eli got a promotion. Who cares? And he loses the bet, basically, if you want to call it a bet, the agreement. And basically, Ronan goes with Alani because he hates Palpatine. And Darth Vader will sense it. And that's really what happens in the last few chapters, I guess. But if we look at like what's changed, right? What did this book do? This book introduced other Chiss besides Thrawn to say how Thrawn is, are all Chiss just stupid brilliant? No. We see, are Alani smart? They do have some different ways of technology, but this was a way to learn the difference in the new canon of Thrawn versus the existing Chiss.
Right.
We covered what happened in the 1 week or 4 days, whichever one it is. We reaffirmed. We knew what happened we learned kind of what happened with the funding battle between the TIE Defender program and Stardust. Again, we already knew that was going to happen with or without this book. We ousted Savit. He was the Treason character. Again, a character introduced for this book. Didn't change anything. We had some small tie-ins to Catalyst. Not necessary. Catalyst happened whether we wanted it to or not.
That was awful.
Pharaoh and Eli are promoted. Who cares? They have another title. Doesn't change what they're doing, really. It didn't seem like a big deal to me. The Grisks are terrorist threats. So we've seen it through some examples now. I think we kind of knew it was coming with the previous.
But they're
book.
irrelevant, right? I mean, the Grisks
so far.
Yeah, but the Grisks are irrelevant. I mean, they don't even matter. I mean, yeah, they're supposed to be this big overlying baddie, but that the Chiss and the Empire are supposed to be afraid of or whatever. But
he needs to explore it, right?
Yeah, I mean, we need more information on that, and that's where like maybe that was something you were going to bring up of where it could go. But my problem with that is that we know ultimately it can't go anywhere unless his books are taking place after Episode 9, because the First Order is the big baddie. Like, there is no Chiss, there is no Grisk, and the Emperor's been dead for a long time, and the Empire has been gone and crumbled. So, like, if there was a power vacuum and the Emperor and the Empire's gone, why didn't the Grisk move right in? And why weren't they in Episode 7?
That needs to be resolved, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, if Grisk are the biggest threat to the entire universe or multiple galaxies, that two other huge empires, the Chiss Ascendancy and the Empire under Palpatine, are afraid of them, then why the heck are they not in Episode 7?
And they already know about each other. They already know about each other, right? Like, you can't just throw it away because they're probing each other. They're trying to get more information. That's been very clear in these last two books. And I think the quote that you and I saw about Thrawn, about Zahn potentially being, he wants to write more Thrawn, but if Del Rey and Disney are done with him, he's like, well, I've said my piece. And it's just like, well, you've raised a lot of questions.
And these books are
Right?
supposed to be canon. Like, so you can't have them be canon and have all this good stuff about Chiss and the Grisk and all these things and all these characters, and then they mean nothing because they're not in episodes 7, 8, and 9 unless he's allowed to continue them afterwards.
Well,
And
how would you fix it? How would you fix it? What would you do? Let's focus on the Grisk first. What would you do to fix this Grisk storyline in terms of being open-ended, or what would you do to have maybe wanted to, or to have felt more rewarded from it?
I think a pretty cool twist would have been that the Grisk are I don't know, maybe it would have been too predictable that the Grisk are actually being controlled. They're slaves of one of the families of the Chiss Ascendancy that is making a power play, and they themselves are actual slaves. It's like the Grisk are all about slaves, right? But what if they were slaves themselves of one of the Chiss hierarchy families that were trying to cause turmoil so that they could improve the military and get more funding or something, or I don't know, like that. I mean, that could have been a possibility. Maybe that would have been too obvious.
No, what if they did that? What I'd want them to explore is, you have Eli with Art Alani now, right?
And Ronan.
And Ronan, and they've introduced. Eli has had some feelings of value. He's not sure he fits in there. He's not sure his efforts are appreciated. When he saw Thrawn, he was looking for some external validation for himself. You can kind of view it as that he was subservient to a master. So you have Eli playing the role of the slave, and you have his masters. That I think if you took that in combination of, you start bringing in that storyline of, is slavery appropriate? What is the turmoil with the ascendancy? And have this be, I don't think it should be a straight allegory to, slavery, in the Civil War or anything like that. But I think there are some interesting questions there about what is it that makes the slavery appropriate, like the means to the end, that I think could be explored, that might make that part more interesting.
I just feel like it was another throwaway thing. Everything in this book just feels tissue paper. I don't know. Nothing of substance. It so bums me out.
What'd you think of the pew pew? What'd you think of the space battles? Were those exciting for you at all?
Yeah, so here's another issue. And I know I'm
Get it out. Get it out.
I'm that guy. I hate it. I'm being so negative. The space battles, I think, were written very poorly. And again, I'm listening to this on Audible. So maybe if I'd been reading it, it would have been easier. But I think that shows how poorly written this part of the book was, or maybe this book overall, that if someone can't follow the audio version, which most people learn things better and remember things better auditorily than reading or writing it. I mean, that's just the way that our brains function, that it goes to prove how poorly written and paced this part of the book, or maybe the whole book is in its entirety is. I couldn't follow the space battles, and I know nautical terms. Like, I know what the starboard is. I know what the bow and port side and all those things are. And I couldn't follow along. I was struggling to follow along with what was going on in the space battle. And I'm trying to picture it in my head, and I couldn't do it. And I did not enjoy the space battles.
I had, so I think I'm reading Two Towers, Lord of the Rings, with some friends right now. And it's interesting when I read that, because I don't know if this was the time. Like, I guess I'd have to do some more research, but when you do like parallel storytelling, like, I don't really see that in a lot of older literature. That, like, when I'm reading, like some like high fantasy stuff like Lord of the Rings, there's like the entire chapter of Ents happens, and then an entire chapter of Rohan happens. Like, they don't jump back and forth between characters or use like certain like techniques in terms of changing scenery that that you see in a lot more modern writing today. And I don't know if that, I assume that's a thing of the times.
Definitely.
But I was thinking about what you said in terms of the space battles, and I remember last week we thought that the middle part was written really well, in terms of being able to visualize what was happening. Is that correct? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, there was some really good stuff. That's about the only part of the book that I liked was the middle chunk of like 9 to 16.
But there was something for me. It's like we almost have opposite. We have opposite experiences here, which is okay. Where while I understood what was happening, it felt empty to me for some reason. And one thing that I think is kind of missing for me is we were missing some parallel storytelling techniques. Such as, so for example, I was thinking about this, like the spinning when they started to reel in the tethers.
Oh, that's a neat trick.
To cause what?
You said spinning. I'll try spinning. That's a neat trick.
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
But they pulled, no, you're fine. They pulled the tethers in to make the ship spin faster, which I know from a gravity perspective. I don't know what the right term. I know like
the physics of it.
Perspective, like what that is and why that is. But I think a lot of kids or children reading this aren't fully able to grasp what this means. I go back to, I think it's To Catch a Thief was the movie where when the main characters were going to, become intimate for the first time. I think it was one of the first movies where then it cut to the fireworks outside to kind of represent that motion of what's happening without, becoming lewd and showing it that from that perspective. I was wondering, like, what if they had some type of parallel storytelling technique for these moments to kind of help explain what was going on. So, for example, like the spinning, like the only thing I can think of, like where I know like everyone can relate to is like ice skating. When like the ice skaters, like if they're stretched out, they're kind of spinning slow, but when they pull their bodies in, they start spinning faster. I think it would have been really interesting to have making that a character moment. Like if you had taken like a flashback of, I'm not saying they needed to do ice skating or anything like that, but if you had some more backstory to Karen Farrow, which I thought was kind of missing, like I still don't know why we care about Karen. She's been there, she's been in a lot of stuff. Why do I care about her though? But I felt like there could have been some better character explanation of her as to why does she seek the approval from her subordinates so much, and could she have had like some moment, I'm not saying this is good, but like an ice skating moment, like where she was looking for an approval from her teacher and she couldn't get it, and that bringing her arms in to spin faster was one of the things that she was struggling with. And you could have parallel storied that with the moment where like the ship brought in the tethers from the side, and you could have gotten some character motion from that as opposed to just pew pew lots of action if you brought more character emotion into those moments. So I don't know what would be missing for you from those final moments when you knew Thrawn was going to show up to help destroy all that stuff. You knew he was going to tell Karen Farrow was going to be able to counter the attacks. But if they had brought some more character moments into it as opposed to it just being a plot step, I think that would have been a lot more rewarding for a lot of readers.
Let me stay on my negative stance here and just continue bashing so everybody can... I can be the hated one. That's fine.
Yeah, you're getting this video all the dislikes. Like, I don't agree with what he says. Dislike.
Yeah. Hit the dislikes. That's fine. That'll get us, on the
dislike this video right now to let Crypto know what you think.
Yeah, please dislike and then bash me in the comments. I'm fine with that. So the pacing. So not only do I feel like that you were 100% correct that they needed more personalized stuff in there. And I'm the action guy. You know that. You and I have been friends for a long time. I love the action. I love when there's battles and the fights. And we've talked about movies before and stuff too. And I'm just like, meh. It was all character-driven stuff and everything. But you do need that sometimes. And
yes, you do.
I agree with you. I feel like that was missing. But I also feel like they paced it wrong the last third of the book as well.
Okay.
Because there was no character development and they're just all doing the pew, 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 pew here at the end, we knew that Eli and Pharaoh, Aralani, excuse me, were going to be fine. And either they were going to win by themselves or we knew Thrawn was going to show up because Thrawn was already done with his battle. And that was very, very that was stupid to me. We should have not known that Thrawn was done with his battle.
I totally agree. That was mishandled.
Yeah. So if this was a movie or a show, that we would not have seen that scene. So we would have jumped. I mean, if they were jumping back and forth between the scenes, we would have jumped to Eli and Aralani, but we would have not known how Thrawn's battle concluded, or if it had concluded yet. And I think that's important, is that there's no suspense. I knew either they were going to be saved by Thrawn, or that they were going to win on their own. And I felt like, again, to the pacing of this, I thought that chunk took up way too much at the end of the book. This book is called Thrawn, not Eli and Aralani's escapades.
Well, okay, and we haven't even talked about... Okay, so let's talk about what's important. There was in my opinion, this is huge. There was a moment in this book that I feel like is being glossed over, and that's when Aralani revealed what Eli's research was.
Yeah, I was trying to say something about this earlier, but it didn't fit what we were talking about, and this is huge. Huge.
The fact that they could potentially predict when Force sensitives are going to be born.
Yeah.
That's like huge when you think about this war between these two sides, particularly when it comes to Jedi. The Jedi in New Canon, I did find some references to this in the New Canon as opposed to just Legends, because Legends got a little weird, I feel like, with the further you went back. And what was that story that we read that was like they were just almost like just pooping on like what the Jedi were doing in A New Dawn or something like that.
Yeah. They had some weird Force powers there.
I found in the New Canon they still have Jedi Seekers that exist to go. Their sole purpose are Jedi to go out and find young Force-sensitive children for the sole purpose of training them and bringing them into the Jedi Order, essentially stealing potential candidates for Sith or evil Force users to corrupt. If this research pans out, think about what that means for the Jedi Order, but then think about what it means for someone who is a Sith
like
or
Palpatine.
Imagine if he got the ability.
Yeah, see, this is why I have the problem with this too, is so originally when the first, 4, 5, and 6 came out, the Force, we didn't know a lot about it because there's only 3 movies. And it's very magical and mystical and almost religious-esque, right? And even a little bit more religiously adds to it. George Lucas kind of insinuated that Anakin had a Christ-like conception that...
a little on the nose there.
Right? I mean, that I can't remember Anakin's mom's name. Shmi. That, the Force just impregnated her with Anakin, and it's very mystical and religious-y and all that. And now it's being quantified, even, I think, worse than midichlorians, really, right? That they could basically predict the genetic codes that are being combined to create Force-sensitive children. I mean, so now you're really scientifically changing the idea of the Force in Star Wars lore. I think this is huge.
I don't know how he got this into this book, and an editor wasn't like, that might be problematic.
Like, how did Disney not be like, no?
Oh, boy. If they don't follow up on this in book 4, if there is a book 4, and if they don't follow up on the turmoil in the Chiss ascendancy, and there is some corruption there, and we don't find out more about that, I might be done with the Thrawn series, just with how frustrated I am that there's a lack of progression at this point in time.
So we've been going for a little over half an hour, and let me just do my one last major complaint, and then I promise viewers I will be done, and you can rake me over the coals all you want in the comment section. But so Thrawn's superpower is, the power of observation. He can read facial cues and stuff like that, but really his Thrawn ability, and I don't remember what I called it, but...
His Thrawniness.
His Thrawniness, yes. His Thrawniness is reading art to figure out and overcome his adversaries. And it's just like in movies that you guys complain about, I'm sure, or you get tired of, and Una here, he gets tired of when prophecy is used as a scapegoat for every problem. And just like in superhero movies, when they use quantum this to fix everything, and or the force is used to fix everything. Oh, I'll just meditate with the force, or I'll use a force bubble, or this force power, or this force this, or I'll force sleep them, or I'll use my force shoes, whatever. The Thron, they did this with Thrawn's, Throniness power. And he was now able to do all that through music. And yes, I know, you can even say, oh, but Crypto, they said that he couldn't do it just because of the music. He had to use this special, unique situation with Savit, and because music encompasses his whole life, and, it's in his core and his being, and this, like, BS. All right?
So you needed more. You needed more for that step. You felt that he stepped too far.
He stepped too far. Thrawn had a unique set of abilities that is a honed skill and craft, not the Force, not magic, and he took it too far.
Okay.
This is like when Michael Jordan went from basketball to baseball. Just because you're awesome at one doesn't mean you're good at something else.
Oh, that's hysterical.
Rant over.
I'll give it to him. It didn't upset me. I'm fine with if you're upset. I'm not gonna try and tell you that it's okay or combat that. It just didn't upset me on a primal level the way that it did for you. All right, let's wrap this up. Week 1, you were approaching 8. Mm-hmm. Week 2, I think you said solid 8.
Solid 8.
Final result. As a result of all of the frustrations and all of the potential, everything in the text, what do you give this book as a whole to someone?
6.5.
Okay.
We've read far worse, and I am comparing it to other books that are far worse. Other books in general, other Star Wars books. It's not a bad written book. I know I'm being nitpicky, and I understand that. I just had high expectations and hopes because I do love the first 2 books. I'll give the first one a 10. I'll give the second one a 9 or 9.5, even with the crappy Padme stuff. This book,
dude, this book just raised the previous 2 books for you. You were like a okay.
Yeah, I would say I will rate the first 2 books even higher now because of this book.
All right. I gave the first book a 9, the second book an 8. I'm going with this book. Now, I did first week 7, second week 7. I'm going with 7.5.
And you went up. That's interesting.
Rating.
That's interesting.
I did.
So I know I didn't have a quote, but the only part that resonated with me, and I can't remember the exact words, was actually by Aralani to Thrawn. So, I mean, I know is that irony that I'm using an Aralani quote, even though I was mad that most of the end of the book was about her. So when she's saying goodbye to Thrawn, if I was a crier, that would have been a little bit of a tear jerk moment there at the end when she's basically saying goodbye to him, because I don't know if they're, boyfriend, girlfriend, or brother, sister, kissing cousins, but they have a very close relationship of some sort. And she is obviously very torn that she's never going to see him again, probably. And that was good. Yeah. That was good writing right there at the end. That got me in the feels.
I was satisfied with the ending. I went into this expecting a pew-pew book. I got enough out of the bureaucracy comments, and there was that quote about the bureaucracy will be the death of the empire. I was very satisfied with that. I just we'll see what happens with the next book, if there is another book. I hope Del Rey does fund another Thrawn book. I hope this book does well enough to do another one, because what a horrible ending to a trilogy if this was the last book they let him do. So all right, with that, let's sign off. We're doing the Reavers by William Faulkner next, so make sure you click the subscribe button. Do you see that? I'm doing the marketing this week. Are you jealous?
And hit the dislike button for this one. Lots of dislikes because I'm being mean to Thrawn.
They're gonna take away your nerd card.
That's right.
So we've got that. We've got that. We've got some more short stories planned. So Plenty of more to find out from the analysis of the Codex Cantina. And with that, Una signing out.
Peace, guys.